I'm holding my mic by the hand because we're not supposed to be shooting any video. We are supposed to be resting until come next week when it's time to release our next episode. But I needed to come back because why? Anonymous said, you better tell my story and you better tell my story today. You better tell my story today. Okay. So Anonymous called me and said, listen, this is what I went through a couple of months ago, and I just cannot get over it. And I just want you to share it because I'm just envisioning this happening to another person, and I am not for it. So please tell my story. So we are here today to tell that story very shortly. We're going to cap it at 10 minutes because we're not supposed to be shooting. Listen, in case you're new here, my name is Yolanda Nyengeza. I'm an attorney by profession. So this channel, The Legal Detour, is meant for this exactly. We get stories from people who tell us about their lived experiences, the mistakes made by their parents or themselves, and they try and warn you. They want you to learn from the law and understand it from their perspective of experience. So we're here today. So Anonymous's story goes like this. Anonymous says that she was the only child of her parents. Now, as much as she was the only child, the parents had separated during Anonymous's life. We're not going to say when, just so that you don't figure out Anonymous. Now, Anonymous says, after my parents separated, my dad obviously lived his own life, but he says his dad met a lady that he stayed with, never got married, and the lady actually had 2 kids, and they never had additional children after that, so hence I was an only child. Anonymous says that unfortunately before my dad could retire, he passed away. And so we then had to claim from his pension fund. Apparently he was working for a nice company, so now they had to go forward and file for a claim on the pension. So Anonymous says there were 4 claimants here. The 2 children that my dad was living with and their mother, and also myself. Now Anonymous says we were required to produce or file affidavits, and I drafted my own and the others also did the same. Now she says when I was writing for this claim, this affidavit, I simply stated that okay, as much as my dad was my dad, he really wasn't taking care of me that much, especially after I was of age of majority. I then was being taken care of and fully supported by my mom, and now I'm fully independent. I have a permanent job, I'm doing well. I would see him from time to time, but I'm not necessarily dependent on him, etc. Right? So Anonymous painted that picture. Now, when it came to the finalization of the distribution, after the pension fund folks had received everything, then a decision was made as to how the pension was going to be split. This is where now Anonymous had an issue. So Anonymous says, tell me why I, as the biological child of my father, I got 10% of that money, and the rest of it was split amongst the 3 people who were the 2 children, right? Was stepsisters to her, and also the stepmother. Anonymous says, I could not understand. I was boiling. I then called, the people who were handling the whole distribution. And one lady was speaking to her, and she said, I just want you to explain how this can happen, that my own biological father, his pension could go to other people and they could be much more entitled more than me. And she says to me, listen, this lady sat down and said, calm down, let me explain to you. She says, this lady made it clear that it's not that you are not necessarily supposed to get anything, because obviously your father is your father. But she says that we had to assess everything and then make a decision. Remember, they request affidavits and certain proof, etc. Now, Anonymous created and painted a picture that she was not necessarily dependent on the dad, and she didn't really care about the funds that the dad had based on how she wrote her own affidavit. She was like, I can take care of myself. I have a permanent job, wada, wada, wada. And that's not wrong. She was telling the truth. And then in addition to that, Anonymous never even produced any proof to show maybe her dad used to send her something. So it was quite clear that she was not necessarily dependent a lot on the dad, and she was able to sustain herself. The other three, on the other hand, showed that they were extremely dependent on Anonymous's dad. For example, there were certain things that the dad was paying for the kids that he was living with, as much as the children were not necessarily his biological children, but he had created this dependency relationship between the both of them, which is Anonymous's dad and the kids of the stepmother of Anonymous. And so when he passed away, already they could feel it. They could feel his absence financially because he was covering most of their costs of living. Even the mother of the two children, she was not working. She was extremely dependent on Anonymous, and there was so much proof that they had provided, right, as to the things that he was doing for them. And so based on that information, it was decided that the people that need much more are the ones who were living with the dad and not Anonymous. Anonymous says, obviously this is just a summary of what she said to me, but I understood from that perspective because I really downplayed, and I was clear that I didn't care about him because obviously he was not a part and parcel of my life. Now Anonymous says, you guys need to learn and need to understand. Who needs to learn and understand? It's you, the person who has a pension fund. If the idea is that your children must get much more, you need to toe the line. You need to decrease how much of a dependency you're creating between you and any other person. Doesn't have to be stepchildren, any other person. Because this plays a role in such situations, especially in the determination of how much a person will get in terms of a pension fund. Remember, Section 37C says nothing about blood being preferred, etc. But the most important thing that Section 37C says is we need to look at dependents, right? And then a determination will be made by the people who have or who handle the pension fund. Then they're going to decide on the distribution, in particular where there's no form that nominates anybody, because in this instance, Anonymous says we didn't have a nomination form. And so the people that came through, obviously, they had to provide affidavits to show dependency, etc. And so it's important that you understand that these things are not, especially a pension fund, is not necessarily paid out on the basis that you had this blood relation with that one or blood relation with this one. A number of things are looked at, because at the end of the day, how you had conducted yourself during your lifetime is going to influence how the pension payout is going to be distributed amongst the dependents that you've left behind. So toe the line, understand, and also as a person who is claiming, sometimes I always say to people, if you don't understand what you're claiming for and you're going to be emotional when you're filing a claim, rather get yourself a practitioner who's going to help you claim. Because sometimes we allow our hurt to speak into the affidavits, and that's not the time to be doing that. Because at that time, you also want to get something from the distribution, and a fair distribution, right? So I'm going to end it here. I'm going to cut it here. I think that's enough. You've heard from Anonymous's story. We can then engage in the comment section. Guys, I'll see you again when we have the other video up. My name is Yolanda Nyengeza. I'm an attorney by profession. Do not forget, we are based in Johannesburg, or I am based in Johannesburg. I'll see you some other time.